Hi friends, welcome to today's video. It's nice to spend some time with you. Today we are going to talk about a fairly famous case, I would say. I had heard of this case quite a few times, but I really did not know the specifics of the case, and so I wanted to dive a little bit deeper myself and learn about it and share with you. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Just to get through our quick housekeeping items, down in the comments below you will see a pinned comment from me where I will list 3 cases that I have some interest in covering and would like you to vote which one sounds the most interesting to you. And if you feel comfortable doing so, I would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, comment down below anything to just support the success of our channel. So, housekeeping has been concluded, so let's discuss the SETAGAYA family murders. At the turn of the past century, the Miyazawa family, who lived in a suburb of Tokyo called SETAGAYA, seemed to be a pretty typical middle-class family. However, after a quiet New Year's Eve, their bodies were discovered by their neighboring relatives, which would unearth a tragic question mark that has lingered to this day. For most people, I would say New Year's Eve is typically viewed as a joyous occasion. It is a sign of change, that the old is fading away and we are welcoming in the new. It's a time that we take to reflect on the things that we did in the year that we are saying goodbye to, and some of us make resolutions, some of us make goals, and I really do just respect that no matter what you choose to do, it is a time of reflection. It can be a time to celebrate a promising fresh start and generally spent with family or close friends. In Japan, this day is known as Omisoka, and it is widely regarded as one of the most important days of the year. There are different customs and traditions involved, which most people follow. Now, in the United States, where I live, one of the biggest traditions is that New Year's Eve tends to be a time where people will party or celebrate to an extent, and then at midnight you kiss somebody. But in Japan, New Year's is actually treated as one of the most prestigious of holidays, which I had no idea, so I thought that was very cool to learn. But at the turn of the century, an event would occur that forever marred the holiday season. It occurred in the district of Tokyo known as SETAGAYA, and for close to 2 decades, what happened on this night has continued to completely stump Chimney's family. Mikio Miyazawa, the 44-year-old patriarch of the family, worked for Interbrand, which was a London-based marketing firm. It's not entirely clear what kind of work Mikio did for this business, but this was a large company with offices in over 20 countries, and this company had overseen large marketing campaigns for companies like Microsoft, Nissan, Xerox, and many other very well-known companies. And just the year before, in 1999, Interbrand was the company responsible for branding the term Wi-Fi. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight as to the type of company this was. His employees at Interbrand described Mikio as congenial. They would say that he was the kind of guy that really got along with everyone. He was not the kind of person that would make enemies, and he never really had any problems with the people he encountered. Then we also have Yasuko Miyazawa, the family's 41-year-old mother and wife, and she was very much viewed the same way. She was seen as kind and compassionate by everyone. She was a teacher that spent a lot of her time with her children, and those two children were 8-year-old Nina and 6-year-old Ray. Nina, the couple's daughter, was in the 2nd grade at the time and was by all accounts a typical little girl. She was playful, she was fun, she enjoyed soccer and ballet, and she was fairly active in both of those. And then Ray, the youngest of the family, had been going through some issues as of recent. He had a speech impairment which had been causing the family a fair amount of stress. They had started to seek out professional help for his impairment, and this really was a real worry to them at the time. Mikio and Yasuki Miyazawa had moved into their SETAGAYA-based home in 1990, and at the time it had been a development with over 200 families, and it seemed like a nice enough area to raise a family. So SETAGAYA is one of Tokyo's 23 districts, and it was the 2nd largest of them all, located just southwest of the main city. It was just a short distance from the Tokyo Bay, and SETAGAYA was a very residential-looking area that really stands out from the busy and cramped surroundings, so it makes sense why this was an appealing place to settle down and raise a family. But interestingly enough, the Miyazawa family was a very interesting thing in and of itself. It was technically considered one house, but it was much closer to a duplex than anything. It allowed the Miyazawas to live right Zuko's family, which mainly was her mother, but also would consist of her sister and her brother-in-law, who would live there during this specific period of time. So this would allow a total of 7 family members to live in this shared space. Although there was no internal connection between the two houses, so very much like a duplex, to get from one side to the other, you would have to go outside of one unit and enter through another door connected to the other unit. There also was a park pretty close behind their house, and this park had been there for years, but the city had been planning on expanding it. And this meant that most of the Miyazawa's family's neighbors had been moving out in recent months in order to make way for this expansion. So it's like the park was being expanded, but people were losing their houses in the process. So around this time, approaching New Year's Eve, with all of these families moving out, it would narrow down in the neighborhood to just 4 families, basically. You had the Miyazawas, you had their relatives living next door, and 2 other families that lived on the street. But that was all that was left, so it really started to feel like a ghost town in their neighborhood. Most of the activity from the area was happening in the skate park right behind their family home. And this was the busiest part of the ever-expanding park. But this did lead to some issues for the Miyazawa family. The only thing separating the skate park from their family home was a single fence. In the week leading up to New Year's Eve, Mikio had confronted a group of loud and obnoxious teenagers at the skate park for making too much noise. And around the same time, a witness reported seeing him also confront a group of young adolescents that were kind of up to no good and getting into trouble. And they, it was called the Bosozoku, which was basically a Japanese motorcycle gang of sorts. So with all of this going on behind their house, the Miyazawa family did have plans to move, but they would have been one of the last ones to do so. They were looking at another home in the area, and the increased foot traffic behind their house because of this expanding park made things a little challenging for them, but they really just had this plan of tough it out for a few months, and once they were able to move, then they could leave it all behind them and they would be fine. But unfortunately and tragically, the Miyazawa family would never get this chance. So in this same week leading up to New Year's Eve, there would be some other unusual experiences for the family besides the encounters with these rebels or the motorcycle gang or whatever you want to call them. Apparently in the summer months, the community had started to notice some of the local area's animals tale. Now, based on research and due to kind of a language barrier in reporting, it's hard to fully capture all of the information, at least from my perspective, but from what I've gathered, there were enough rumors and eyewitness accounts that it seems like this is a noteworthy piece of information to add. Now on December 25th, Christmas Day, Yasuko would mention to her father-in-law that a strange car had been parking in front of their house. This had happened on more than one occasion, despite the fact that there was other parking nearby, and it wouldn't require a person to park like right in front of their house. Then that's why she was very observant of this, because despite there being so many other parking options, this car would always park in front of their house, which is creepy. 2 days later, on December 27th, a man estimated to be in his 40s was seen walking around the Miyazawa family's property by an eyewitness. Some people would claim that this was seemingly innocent, given that the park was literally their backyard, essentially, and that would allow for people to kind of walk in the area. But to other people, especially in retrospect, it feels suspicious. Then on December 29th, just days before the dawn of the century, a man was spotted in a nearby train station, which was just a few miles away from where the family was living. This man was wearing what they called a skater type of outfit, and I will include a photo description in the video so you can see how they describe this. But an eyewitness would recall that this was being an odd choice of attire due to the weather. They thought that this man looked very underdressed. And it was on this day, the 29th, that the police believe a man matching this description purchased a sashimi knife from a shopping area near that train station. It was the only sashimi knife purchased at the supermarket on that very day, so it was relatively easy to trace. And we will talk about why this sashimi knife is important here in a little bit. The next day, on December 30th, a man matching the same description was spotted near Shingawa Station, which was about a mile away from where the Miyazawas lived. This person was described to be in the age range of 35 to 40 years old, and appeared to be getting closer and closer to the Miyazawa family home in SETAGAYA. And unbeknownst to them, Saturday, December 30th would be the last day living for the entire Miyazawa family. So, as it always does, this day started out normal for them. They went about their daily business. They were preparing for the New Year's holiday. There was a festive cheer in the air, and they were getting ready to celebrate such an important holiday to their culture. Sometime in the early evening, at around 6 p.m., the family went out to go shopping. It was not 100% confirmed that all 4 of the family members went out shopping, but an eyewitness did recall seeing them, or claimed to see all 4 of them at this shopping center around this time frame. And a neighbor who drove by their house that evening recalled seeing their family car missing around 6:30 p.m. So, based off of these puzzle pieces investigators have put together, they do make the assumption that the entire family went out shopping together. They would be back home by around 7 p.m. that night, so they were only gone around an hour or so. And at around 7 p.m., Yasuko would call her mother next door by telephone, and even though they lived next door, they would just call each other by phone sometimes. And it's reported that this conversation itself was fairly mundane and nothing out of the ordinary. It was just a typical regular phone call. It's also suspected that the phone call may have been about Yasuko seeing if their daughter could go next door to spend time with their grandmother. And this was corroborated by the fact that their daughter Nina would go next door to watch a TV show with their grandmother until about 9:30 or so that night. And up until that point in the night, everything was normal for the Miyazawa family. The last recorded activity we have of the Miyazawa family is an accessed email, which was read at around 10:38 p.m. that night. It was Mikio reading a work email. And the reason they are pretty confident that Mikio is still alive and really was the one that accessed it, at least, is because it was password protected. And so he would have had to know the password to get into this like encrypted style email. This is the last moment we know that at least one member of the Miyazawa family was alive. And their home, normally quiet and tranquil, was about to become a house of horrors. In their home in SETAGAYA, this western suburb of Tokyo, on December 31st, the bodies of Mikio Miyazawa, his wife Yasuko, Nina, and Rei would be discovered by Yasuko's mother, which I don't think I've mentioned this, but her name was Haruko. And she would then report these murders to the police, which I cannot even imagine how devastating that would be for this mother to come in and see her daughter, her son-in-law, and her grandchildren murdered. It was reported that Mikio, Yasuko, and Nina had all been stabbed to death, and Rei had been strangled to death. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department's investigation of the crime scene revealed that the family had been murdered at approximately 11:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time, and that the murderer had remained in the house for several hours after the murder committed. The investigators determined that this murderer was able to access the family home by entering an open window in the second floor bathroom at the rear of the house, which it was close to and facing SETAGAYA Park, which was in their backyard essentially. The perpetrator would climb up a tree and then remove the window screen to be able to slip right in. It is said that Ray was sleeping in the second floor bedroom, and the killer would use his bare hands to asphyxiate. It's reported that Mikio likely would go up the first floor stairs after hearing a disturbance in Ray's room. And he would fight the killer in an attempt to protect his family. And he also would wound the killer until he was stabbed in the head with a sashimi knife. According to the police investigation, a section of the sashimi knife blade would break off inside Mikio's head. And then the killer would proceed to stab Yasuko and Nina with the broken blade before murdering them with a santoku knife found in the Miyazawa house. Now, if this wasn't already terrible enough, one of the most bizarre things about this case is that for some period of time, which is not fully determined, but it's about an 8-hour window essentially is what I've read approximately. It could have been 2 hours, it could have been 10 hours, not sure, but it was enough time that it's weird that this killer remained inside the Miyazawa's home. He would use the family computer. He would consume barley tea in the home. He would eat melon and ice cream from their refrigerator. And he would even use their restroom without flushing. He would treat his injuries and wounds with first aid kits and other sanitary products. And finally, he would take a nap on a sofa in the second floor living room while he is surrounded by dead bodies. So, during the investigation process, Mikio's computer was analyzed. It was revealed that it was connected to the internet at 1:18 a.m. the morning after the killings, and again at approximately 10 a.m., which was around the time that Yasuko's mother, Haruko, entered the house and discovered the murders. Haruko started to feel worried and suspicious when she was unable to get her daughter on the phone that morning because the killer had disconnected the phone line, so the phones weren't going through. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it was not uncommon for them to talk on the phone even though they were neighbors. And when she couldn't get a hold of her daughter, she would walk over to their side of the house to see what was going on. However, she would ring the doorbell and ring the doorbell, but nobody would answer the door. So she let herself in, and that is when she came across this devastating scene. So, based off this timeline of information, authorities suspect that the killer had been staying in that house until at least 1:18 a.m. because there was a second, triggering of the computer around 10 a.m. They think that maybe Haruko accidentally bumped the computer or something to make it turn on when she discovered the crime scene. That's why there's such a big gap in time, because they don't know if that 10 a.m. time that the computer picks up this activity, if it was really the killer or if it was Haruko. If it was the killer, then he and Haruko came in very close, passage of each other, given the timestamps of when that computer went off and when she had contacted the police. Some more interesting parts of this case is that the killer maintained a calm demeanor throughout this murder spree, according to investigators, and left various personal possessions at the scene of the crime. They don't think that this person was afraid of being apprehended because he would leave evidence behind. At least that was their perspective. And this murder suspect would change out of the clothes he was wearing into a different outfit and neatly fold what he had been wearing and left it there. And so to investigators, leaving things there did not seem to be an oversight. The suspect left behind sneakers as well in Korean sizing, and so they thought that these would likely have been purchased in Korea. He also left back a dark green hip bag, a black handkerchief, a scarf, and a jacket made of down, down material, and then also black winter gloves. So again, to investigators, this person was completely unconcerned about leaving any biological evidence behind. He did, however, throw away bleeding bandages. Now, if you remember, he used the restroom and did not flush the toilet, and so the feces that were left in the toilet were examined, and the police were able to determine what he had eaten the night before. The way that it was described is that it was a hearty dinner prepared by a mother. They also took this information in conjunction with the handkerchief that he left behind, and they noted that it was beautifully pressed, and so they thought that perhaps this person lived with their mother. Police would also find a bloody fingerprint at the scene, but it was never linked to anyone, despite being able to deduce some highly specific clues about the perpetrator's identity. Police have not been able to identify or catch a suspect. After conducting an investigation, they discovered that the clothing and the sashimi knife left behind by the murderer I was not. Here's a little bit of info. So, Japan is divided into 47 prefectures, which rank immediately below the national government and form the country's first level of jurisdiction and administrative division. They include 43 prefectures, 2 urban prefectures, 1 territory, and 1 metropolis. Okay, so back to the investigation itself. Police would discover that only 130 articles of this specific sweater that the killer wore upon the murder and that he left behind were manufactured and sold. So it was kind of like a limited edition item. But still, they have no idea who murdered this family. Police were only able to identify and trace down 12 of the people who purchased the sweaters. So there was a outstanding substantial number of people they were not able to locate. A very interesting fact is that sand particles were discovered within that hip bag that had been abandoned at the scene of the crime. And investigators would analyze this sand to see where it came from. And it was later proven to have originated in the Nevada deserts, which they were able to more specifically narrow down to the Edwards Air Force Base area in California in the United States. So the question becomes, was this person a part of the United States military? As mentioned earlier, the DNA and fingerprints of the killer was discovered at the Miyazawa's home. However, none of them matched the DNA and fingerprints of the killer in the Tokyo police databases, indicating that they did not have a criminal record. They were able to determine that they had the killer's blood after running tests on just different blood samples in the house. And there were traces of type A blood found that did not belong to anybody in the Miyazawa family. Once they found that they had these traces of type A blood, they would do genetic testing on it. And this testing revealed that the killer was male and possibly mixed race with maternal DNA, indicating that the mother was of European descent, possibly from a southern European country near the Mediterranean. And the paternal DNA indicated that the father was of East Asian origin. Physically, the killer was thought to be around 5 feet 7 inches, which was about approximately 170 centimeters tall. And he was also expected to be fairly thin. The police estimated that the killer was born between 1965 and 1985, which would have made him between 15 and 35 years old at the time of the murders, because of the physique needed to enter into the Miyazawa house by that specific window, by crawling up the tree or climbing up the tree and being able to commit these murders. years. And after analyzing the stab wounds on the bodies of the family, it was determined that the killer was likely right-handed. But again, it has been over 20 years since this family was murdered, and this case has been open for over 2 decades, and no killer has been caught. However, it's reported that authorities have not given up. The police intend to employ DNA analysis of evidence obtained at the scene, utilizing the most up-to-date technologies to create a picture of the perpetrator's face and physical appearance. The horrific murders of the Miyazawa family are still considered to be among the most heinous crimes committed in modern Japan. So that concludes the case of the SETAGAYA family murders. Please let me know what you thought about this case. It kind of gives me Killer in the Wall vibes, because this murderer literally hung out in the home after he murdered them. He ate their food, went on the computer, used the bathroom, didn't flush the toilet, left his clothes out, and then casually took a nap. I don't know, it's bizarre to me, and it's sad that there is no idea of who this person could be. We know that this family was well liked and respected. The only thing that my brain kind of wanders off thinking, and I really have no basis to think that, so I'm just putting that out as a disclaimer, but part of me wonders if there was something going on with him at work, like the nature of his work maybe made him a target. I don't know, because when all of these big businesses were up and coming and making all this money off of computers and the internet, it's just fascinating to me how deep and dark the history of some organizations and businesses go. So you never know. And especially because there was sand found in this bag from the United States. I know I mentioned maybe this was military affiliated, but I'm still 99% sure that someone in the US military would have given their fingerprints in the late 90s, so I imagine they would have cross-checked with military database in the United States. So I don't know, but I'm just maybe he was a target of some sort. I have no idea. And clearly, the police have never been able to figure it out. So please let me know what you thought of this crazy case. And thank you for joining me on this case. I'm so excited to kick off 2023 with you, and I'll see you in our next video.